The following was recorded on April 22nd, 2025. Please keep in mind laws, guidelines, and processes may change over time. This is the Italian Citizenship Podcast, hosted by Marco Permunian and Rafael Di Furia. Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Italian Citizenship Podcast, presented by Italiancitizenship.com. Of course, we're back at it again with Italian attorney Marco Permunian, and I am Rafael Di Furia. And in this episode, we wanted to continue the discussion about the March 28th emergency decree, also known as the Tajani decree. And so, just to jump into things, there are some discussions that are currently going on in Parliament about how things could develop, what might be changed from the original decree, and what may be legal, what might not be legal, how things could even come to look by the time this would get passed or not. But Marco, I think it's important for people to know, what is this emergency decree? Because there are a lot of videos and articles online saying that there is no more Italian citizenship, which is just simply not true. Can you tell us a bit about how the conversion of an emergency decree law works in Italy?
As you just mentioned, the government decided to use an emergency decree to change the eligibility requirements for citizenship by descent. And the use of an emergency decree was actually subject to very many concerns that were expressed by members of the parliament, which were basically saying that the emergency decree was not the type of legislation that needed to be used in this specific case. Rather, a regular law would have been more appropriate to regulate such a complex subject. But before we get into that, let me answer your question. The emergency decree, which was issued on March the 28th by the government, now needs to be converted into law within 60 days from the date of issuance. So it's common practice for the government, whenever an emergency decree is issued, to, on the same day, propose to the parliament a law of conversion. So basically, the government issues a decree and at the same time, simultaneously, sends to the parliament a law proposal with which they propose to the parliament to convert the law decree that they made. And the way in which the conversion works is, first, a commission of members of the parliament is assigned to evaluate the content of the decree. And within the commission, it is possible to propose amendments to the text of the decree. And of course, the commission is made of several members of the parliament, which belong to both sides of the political spectrum. So of course, there are various types of amendments that are being proposed that have to do with proposed changes to the text of the decrease. So right now we're still in the phase during which it's possible to propose amendments to the text of the decree. And actually there was a deadline which has not been met for these amendments to be proposed, and the commission has decided to prolong this deadline. So it will be possible to submit amendments, or proposed amendments rather, to the text of the decree until April the 23rd, after which, unless there is a new postponement of the deadline, it will no longer be possible to submit these proposals to amend the text of the decree. Now, once these proposed changes have been received and evaluated by the commission, they will be voted. So at that point, we'll know whether some amendments are more likely to be approved. And of course, these amendments that are being discussed will potentially affect even heavily the final text of the emergency decree, which was issued on March the 28th.
Well, Marco, thank you so much for explaining about how the system in Italy works and some more details there. And actually, there was one specific detail that I'm quite curious about, because you mentioned that this emergency decree may not have actually been the appropriate way to do that. And within this committee that's been put together, that this is a question that's come up. And so what else has come up in these discussions that are currently going on?
So the one that you just mentioned was one of the most important reasons for concern, and it was brought up by a member of the parliament that belongs to the left. And specifically, they were saying within this commission and as part of this ongoing discussion that, like you mentioned, an emergency decree was not the appropriate form of legislation that should have been used to make changes to such an important subject like citizenship rights of people of Italian descent, or rather, in general, a security decree was not the appropriate form of legislation to affect the citizenship rights in general. So this, according to this member of the parliament, should be the job of the parliament itself, not the job of the government. So the government should deal with real emergency situations and not about things that could be handled easily by the parliament. And of course, it's also more appropriate for the parliament, which is a much larger body made of hundreds of members of the parliament, to make decisions about such an important subject, which should not be decided by the government itself. So one of the points that were made by the left is that the security decree should have never been used in the first place, and that is one of the reasons why it should not be converted into law.
So, Marco, based on this topic here, if it was not the correct way of doing it, and they actually do say that, could that negate this in any way? Would that cancel out this emergency decree, or what would happen in that case?
The discussion that is going on in the parliament has also the purpose of establishing whether the decree was properly issued or if the situation was mishandled. So this could potentially be one of the reasons why the decree may not hold up, and meaning the decree might not be converted into law. Of course, the opposite side is responding that the use of an emergency decree is merely a political decision. So the fact that there was or there wasn't an emergency it has to do with politics, and it's not an objective situation. And of course, this will need to be discussed by both parties within this commission, and they will need to determine whether the decree can hold up or not. Of course, we have said that before, the government has the support of the majority of the parliament right now. So it is less likely that the decree will not be approved, but it's a possibility.
Well, Marco, this is again fascinating. So, what are some of the other discussions that are currently happening at this moment in time?
One of the other points that came up is the fact that the number of Italians residing abroad who get Italian citizenship by descent tend to not vote in the Italian elections, and that could potentially cause a problem in terms of reaching the quorum. The quorum in Italy is the minimum amount of people that need to vote in order for the vote to be taken into consideration. So say there's a referendum, the quorum could be affected by the number of people that reside abroad that have Italian citizenship that are more inclined not to vote for a referendum compared to the number of Italians that live in Italy. So that could cause issues, according to the discussions that are going on in the parliament, in terms of reaching the necessary quorum for a referendum to be even valid. So a member of the left was saying that while they do agree with certain limitations to be put in place, they strongly believe, again, that the security decree or emergency decree was not the appropriate type of legislation to be used, and that more time would be necessary for discussions to take place within the parliament to approve a regular law, meaning the use of a security decree means that things need to be done very quickly. Security decree is approved and then it needs to be converted within 60 days. Whereas if a regular law was to be taken into consideration for such a major change, that would leave more time for the parliament to consider and discuss, what changes need to be applied to the current eligibility requirements to avoid, for example, the issue that I just mentioned, that people from abroad that have Italian citizenship tend not to vote in the Italian elections. So while they were agreeing that certain limitations were to be put in place, they were basically saying we shouldn't have done what we did. We shouldn't have used the security decree. We should have done something different, meaning we should have used a normal law to regulate the situation. So they're saying basically this decree should not be approved. It should be completely removed and we should use now a normal law to make the changes that we want to make to the citizenship laws. One other very important point that was made is that the decree was retroactive, primarily because it was announced on a Friday, but it went into effect from the midnight of the day before, which is sort of unheard of. So it was heavily argued that the decree should not have gone into effect from the midnight of the day before. That, of course, causes major concerns regarding the compliance with the Constitution of such a decree. So this is one of the points that was made during the ongoing discussion within the Commission, within the Parliament. Not only that, but it has also been said that the security decree has retroactively affected the birthright of people to claim their citizenship by descent, a right that they had acquired at birth. So they had that right, and now all of a sudden they no longer have that right. So that is a retroactive removal of a right that people gain at birth. Of course, the government has tried to explain why the security decree has not operated retroactively, and in their explanation they've said that they have touched basically the right of people that had that right for decades but never chose to use it. So this, of course, is the explanation of the government, which has interest in supporting their arguments as to whether the decree should be approved. But of course, this is being heavily challenged within this commission in the parliament that is saying that the decree did, in fact, operate retroactively and that there's no doubt about it. Now, with regard to this specific point, it has been said that it was completely inappropriate to make the decree effective from the midnight of the day before, and that it should have been more appropriate to have a grace period for people to be able to submit their citizenship applications during this grace period. For example, it could have been more appropriate to say, you have now 2 years to complete your citizenship application and submit it, or 1 year. So some sort of grace period that would have allowed people to finish what they started and to be able to submit their citizenship applications. But the way in which it was done, people were basically blindsided and they were not able to submit anything because the decree went into effect the day before the day in which it was announced.
Well, Marco, I'm just wondering, does this mean that there is the potential, based on maybe even a previous precedent set by the situation for those of descent from the Trentino region, where those people may not have been citizens at the time of the formation of Italy, when the rest of Italy became a nation, and therefore were unable to get citizenship within the same guidelines as most people who were from Italy? They were given a specific date that they had to get everything completed by. Would it work roughly in the same way, that because this already existed one time, that this could exist again?
Of course, this is what was being proposed. And of course, we all agree, with the fact that the decree was not the appropriate type of legislation to be used. We also, I believe, many of us can agree on the fact that these changes are not constitutional. But, at the very least, what you just said could have been, a decent way to go if changes were absolutely necessary. At least it would have been appropriate and fair to give people time to finish what they started and to submit their applications, rather than give people a deadline, which basically expired the day before. And so that was completely, I believe, unjust and unfair. Now, with that being said, it is also possible that the law that will convert the decree will state that the old rules apply to any applications that have been filed prior to the date in which the law converts the decree into law. So that is why, of course, we are also suggesting to people that are ready with their documents to file their applications as soon as possible, because one of the theories, even if these are just assumptions, is that the government will basically, or rather the parliament will basically convert the decree into law at the end of May, but that they will say that any applications that were filed prior to the conversions are subject to the old rules.
Very interesting. And just something that I'm very curious about is so far that you've mentioned that a lot of the resistance that this seems to have come up against is from the left. And of course, the politicians in place that put this into effect were more considered to be from the right side, or maybe not just more considered, that they are considered to be from the right side. But I'm wondering if this has come up against any resistance or under any scrutiny from any of the political right in Italy.
Yeah, very surprisingly, this decree was subject to a lot of discussions regarding concerns from both sides of the political spectrum. So I was surprised to learn that even the right expressed concerns regarding the limits that were put in place so suddenly, and also the extent of these limits. And so, more specifically, the right, or some members of parliament, of course, that belong to the right, have said that, first of all, the opinion of the members of the parliament that represent the Italians living abroad, including members of the parliament that operate in North America, so the US and Canada, that the opinions of the Italians living abroad should be taken into consideration seriously. And of course, their voices are being heard through the representation of these members of the parliament that operate in North America and Canada. So, in short, it has been stated that their opinion is very important and that it should be taken into serious consideration, and that the limits that were put in place, maybe they were too much. And of course, again, we can all agree that that was not done properly, that the limits were too much and too sudden. But it has also been brought up that these kind of things basically are in clear violation of the Italian constitution. So that was also surprising, of course, in a positive way, because of course it was the right thing to do to say that these kind of changes were basically too much and too sudden and in clear violation of the Italian constitution. But I was surprised to learn that a member of the right said expressively that it should be carefully evaluated whether the constitution was violated with this kind of decree and the changes that were put in place by the government. Ultimately, I was very happy to learn that the ongoing discussion at the parliament is touching, these subjects, and that there were even arguments made by members of the parliament that belong to the right as to why this decree should not pass as it is. So I was positively surprised by the work done by this commission that has really gone above and beyond to try to alter how the decree will actually be made at the end.
So, Marco, based on all of these discussions that are currently going on and everything that we've seen, is there a specific stance that ICA is taking in regards to the recommendations that it is making, whether in a general sense or in a case-by-case sense, what it is that an individual maybe should or shouldn't do during this time?
So again, I have to say that I was very optimistic when I read the discussion that was going on in the parliament and the points that were made regarding potential changes to the decree. Of course, the next few days will be crucial, and I believe by the first week of May, we will have a vote regarding the potential amendments, and then we'll know better whether the decree will pass and whether the decree will pass as it is right now, which I believe is unlikely. So my recommendation would be, of course, to hold tight, because I believe that this decree could be heavily changed before it's converted into law. Of course, to those people that have their applications ready and all the documents ready, I would recommend file their cases as soon as possible, because regardless, it is advisable to file an application sooner rather than later. And to those people who are not ready with their documents and that are in the process of collecting their documents, I believe we need to be optimistic that this decree will not remain as it is and that there will be positive changes made in the end.
Well, Marco, thank you so much for making yourself available for this episode of the Italian Citizenship Podcast. And of course, for those of you who are listening in or watching on YouTube, be sure that you're subscribed to this YouTube channel for further updates, as well as that you are following Italian Citizenship Assistance on Facebook and Instagram. And for more information, of course, make sure that you're subscribed to this YouTube channel as well as the audio-only podcast. But of course, if you're subscribed to this YouTube channel, that means that you are also automatically subscribed to the Italian Real Estate Podcast, where you can hear more about purchasing property in Italy and making Italy your home in a very practical way, as well as where to do so. But of course, we have been here again with Italian attorney Marco Permunian from ItaliancitizenshipAssistance.com. I am Rafael Di Furia. Stay safe and healthy out there, and we will see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.